Okay, so I was going through my bank statement last month and I realized that I had been paying for a subscription that I hadn't used in over a year, which that's like throwing away money every single month. And I had no idea. And if you've been there too, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help because Rocket Money is an all-in-one personal finance app that makes managing your money so much easier. It helps you identify unwanted subscriptions, lower your bills, set a budget, even save for your goals. And it's all in one place. Now, I personally love how Rocket Money tracks all of my subscriptions because after I connected my bank account, it gave me this like clear list of everything that I'm paying for each month. So canceling that forgotten subscription, it literally just took a couple of taps. And it's not just the subscriptions. Rocket Money can also negotiate bills for you. So, like painful internet bills, phone bills, cable bills, let Rocket Money's negotiators try to get you a better rate. No waiting on hold with customer service. It's all handled just so simply right there in the app. So take control of your finances today and stop paying for things that you don't even use. Head to rocketmoney.com/10tolife to try it all out for free. You can also unlock even more features with premium. Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of 10 to Life with me, Annie Elise, where I am just sitting here in my big comfy chair talking true crime with you. Now today I want to talk about a case where it is a brutal double murder that happens inside a home. The security system is still on when the police show up, and there are only 2 living witnesses inside. And you would think that this case would be pretty cut and dry because of that. Okay, you've got security footage, you've got 2 living witnesses, great. Well, think again. If you know anything, if you've been watching here for a while, if you're a true crime person like me, you know there's always a twist. Not always, but a lot of the time, where you feel like, well, I didn't see that coming. Annie, why wasn't this so cut and dry? How did that happen? Well, I'm gonna break it all down for you. So guys, let's jump right in. In 2016, 42-year-old Antonio Armstrong was a loving husband and father from Southwest Houston, Texas. Antonio was pretty tall, bald, athletic, and in fact, while he was in college at Texas A&M, he was a football star. He was so good that he was drafted into the NFL in 1995. He played there for a couple of seasons. Then he ended up going into the Canadian Football League for a few years, which I didn't even know that that was a thing. I knew that there was like basketball in Italy, but I didn't know that there was like a Canadian Football League or team. But I guess that makes sense because sports are everywhere, right? Why am I so stupid? Hold on, let me think. Yeah, sports are literally Sorry, guys. It's early. But anyway, so he ended up going to the Canadian Football League. Now, during this time, Antonio would also go to his family's church. That is where he met his wife, Dawn. Dawn was beautiful. She was charming. She already had a baby named Josh from a previous relationship. But Antonio and Dawn just hit it off so quickly. They felt like they were instantly soulmates, so they got married. Antonio also legally adopted Josh, since Josh's biological father didn't have a relationship with him. And Josh was very, very little when all of this happened, so much so that he didn't even realize that Antonio was his stepdad. He called him dad from the very first time he learned how to speak. It was really all he ever knew. And I think that that is not only so powerful, but also so common. And I'll just go lightly onto a personal story of mine. I called my grandpa, my mom's dad, Grampy, as long as I can remember, right? Like, I didn't know that it was anything different. But when I was in high school, literally high school, I think I was a junior, I realized that it wasn't my mom's real dad, that she had been adopted. But I never even knew that. The reason I bring that up is because it's so common where things like that happen at such a young age to where nobody ever really knows any different, right? And the reason, again, I harp on that is it'll make more sense as we go. So anyway, early on in their marriage, Antonio and Dawn were still living in Canada, and that is where they welcomed their first baby together in March of 1999. His name was Antonio Jr., but they called him AJ for short. As their family grew, they realized that they wanted to be in Houston. Antonio had grown up there. That's where his family was, so it really just made sense. So Antonio quit his job, and they settled down in Houston. and a few years later, they had their third child together. Her name was Kyra. Antonio had also been a go-getter from the time that he was a kid, all the way until he landed his dream job as the pro football player. And that mindset did not just go away when he retired. After putting down roots in Houston, he and Dawn opened up a gym called First Class Training. This was in 2004.
First Class Training is a total fitness solution facility that includes personal training, athletic training, inclusive training, group fitness, boot camps, corporate wellness, Pilates, and nutrition. We have everything you need to get fit and stay fit. Our goal is to take everyday individuals with respect to their limitations and find the best way to coach them to reach their fitness goals.
And the gym was really successful, and it ended up expanding to multiple locations in the area. People loved that they were getting personalized training from this former football star. And it also didn't hurt that Antonio was so positive and just so uplifting for all of his clients. He had this spark to him that was just so incredibly inspiring to everyone. So much so that he ended up going on to become a motivational speaker. He would give advice, pep talks, and even at times he would touch on sensitive subjects. He would do this on his YouTube channel.
Antonio Armstrong here. Like all Americans, I have been deeply impacted by the tragic events that have taken place over the past couple of weeks. In search for an understanding, I've come to this conclusion that it's not flesh and blood that we wrestle against. No, it's not a black thing, nor is it a white thing, but it's principalities and powers, rules of darkness here on this earth, and spiritual wickedness in high places that we're fighting against. To get a clear understanding of this, let's dig a little bit deeper in this week's segment of Strong Talk.
Now, as if his plate wasn't full enough, he also served as the associate pastor at the Spirit of Life Church, which was run by his family. He didn't mind doing all of this. He didn't mind the grind or putting in all of this hard work. And it was for one very important reason: his family. He wanted the very best for his kids because growing up, his family had been poor. They had lived in a bad area. He didn't want that for his family. So it was his mission to make sure that his kids had better opportunities in life. Whether it was the really prestigious private school that they attended, the chance to play any sport that they wanted, or all the nice clothing that they wore. It was all due to the fact that both Antonio and Dawn worked to make it happen. Antonio and his family lived in the Bel Air neighborhood of Houston. It's got these gorgeous tree-lined streets and a really cozy, family-friendly vibe. Something that you would see out of a movie, like what brings it to my mind is Father of the Bride. You know how it just is so cozy, it's beautiful, but it mixes that small town charm with some really beautiful homes, these amazing schools, parks, everything that you would want, especially while raising a family. It has its crime like any area outside of a major city, but it's really not considered too bad to those who live there. Now, on summer break in 2016, Antonio and Dawn were busy with the kids, with their gym business, and all the other craziness that comes with summer. Their oldest son, Josh, who is now 21 at this point, lived walking distance from them in his own apartment by now. However, he would check in with them regularly and, come by and they would go there. Now, even though they were still staying in close touch with Josh did have a bit of a strained relationship with his family. I'm not exactly sure when all of the problems started for him, though. He wasn't much older than AJ, but in some ways, life was just a little bit different for Josh. He kind of thought of himself as the black sheep of the family. For one, he didn't find out that Antonio wasn't his biological father until he was a teenager. I'm not sure why his mom and Antonio kept that a secret for so long, but I can only imagine how confusing and hard that must have been for him to find out. He went his entire life thinking his dad was, his dad, only to find out that he was truly his adopted dad. Not that that would necessarily make much of a difference. I think we as adults know that you can love an adopted child as if they are your own. That is so often the case in many families, but for a child who is just learning about that for the first time, it can feel almost as a betrayal of sorts, as though they weren't honest with you. And then you have this question about your identity, who you really are, where you came from, and it can lead to a lot of hurt and even resentment. Now, the reality, as I said, was that Antonio was his dad. He had been there practically since day one, and he had raised Josh like his own flesh and blood. There was no treating AJ and Kyra differently because biologically they were his, not at all. Antonio didn't look at Josh that way. So like I said, I'm not sure why Antonio and Dawn waited so long and waited as long as they did to tell him, but they did. And after they did end up telling him, Josh changed a bit. He became more distant. He really did feel like AJ and Kyra were treated better because they were related to Antonio. So Josh definitely struggled with that realization, and he felt kind of alone. And in some ways, Antonio was closer with AJ, but it wasn't on purpose, and it wasn't like Antonio made it obvious to the point where it was unfair. As we know, Antonio was a very well-known and talented athlete, and AJ took after him. He wanted to be just like his dad, so he played football in school, and like Antonio, he was good, really good. He played basketball too. So I'm sure that all of that led to Josh even feeling more distant from Antonio. And while he was at college, Josh began smoking marijuana and drinking a lot. He basically kind of just stopped caring about grades and life and taking it seriously, and he eventually dropped out of school and moved back home. And being out of school definitely didn't help him. He just didn't take care of himself. He wore dirty clothing all the time, he didn't wash his hair, and it's like he just didn't care about anything anymore. When he still lived at home, there were times that Kyra would walk past Josh just standing in the bathroom and he would be talking to himself. It was concerning, and all of it was really difficult for Antonio and Dawn to watch. They had worked so hard to give their kids the best life that they possibly could, and here Josh was, basically in their eyes at least, flushing all of that down the drain. But they really didn't know why. Was it that he was still so upset about finding out that Antonio was not his real dad? Or was it something more? The final straw for Antonio and Dawn was when they went out of town and found out that Josh had a huge, mega big house party while they were gone. There was also loads of alcohol and loads of weed. And those two things were a big no-no for Antonio and Dawn. Not to mention Josh was underage at the time, so they kicked him out because of it. But once Josh was out of the house, things actually kind of calmed down for everyone. It all went back to normal for the family that summer too. That is until July 29th. And in the early morning hours at 1:40 a.m., Antonio and Dawn's middle child, AJ, called 911.
Bel Air 911, where's your emergency?
I'm at Palmetto Street. I just heard 2 gunshots downstairs in my parents' room.
Okay, what's that address one more time?
Palmetto Street.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, you're going to be in Houston. Stay on the line, okay?
Houston 911, do you need medical, police, or fire?
Going to be police. Is Bel Air with a transfer? Palmetto. He's whispering. Advising he just heard gunshots in his parents' room.
What's the cross street at the corner?
I think I can look down off there. I don't think Maple is something like that. I'm not really trying to be police heard.
Is this a house?
Yes.
What's your phone number? And your name?
AJ.
Any medical attention needed?
I heard gunshots, so I don't really know.
In your parents' bedroom?
Yes. And your doors are making us
Can you hear anything else?
I don't know.
Okay.
If you don't go on that day, if you don't go, because they're gonna have knives outside.
Did it sound like a handgun, rifle, or shotgun?
I'm not good at guns, but out there, I don't know if it's anything like that. I know my dad has guns. She's in the school right next to there.
Okay, can you hear anything else that's going on?
I feel like it's loud,
Okay, your parents' bedroom, where are they at in the house?
11 a.m. p.m. It's only a 4-hour thing. Yeah.
Okay, I've already dispatched police to Palmetto, is that correct? Yes. Cross Street is Ferris? Okay. And do you know if anyone needs medical? Okay. And where are you at in the house? You're on the 3rd floor? Okay, I'll have police on their way. I'm just trying to make sure if I need to send an ambulance as well. Yes, just sit there. And is your door closed? You don't have a door, okay. Okay, don't leave from the safety of your room. Your sister is downstairs? On the 1st floor? How old is she?
12.
Okay, police are on their way. I'm just getting more information. Does it sound like anything else is going on without leaving from your location?
I'll let you know when I get them.
Just before 2 a.m., the police finally got there. They knocked on the door and AJ came down from the 3rd floor to let them in. And when he came down, he disarmed the security system first before letting them in so that it wouldn't go off. The police right away made sure that AJ's younger sister Kyra was okay. She had been asleep when AJ called 911. Neither of them had been harmed, and neither of them had seen anything suspicious, besides what AJ had already told that operator. As the police went upstairs to where the gunshot had been heard, they went into Antonio and Dawn's bedroom. Both Antonio and Dawn were laying in their bed with bloody pillows over their heads. It was as if someone had used those pillows to muffle the loud bang of gunshots. Dawn was dead, and she had 2 gunshot wounds right behind her right ear. Antonio had been shot once in the top of his head, but somehow, miraculously, he was still alive. However, he was unconscious. So the first and most important thing was to rush Antonio to the ER to try to save his life. In the meantime, while the doctors were doing everything that they possibly could, the detectives were getting to work trying to figure out what had happened here. There was definitely plenty of evidence for the police to go through, the number one thing being a note that was in the kitchen right there on the counter, and in all caps it read, "I have been watching you for a long time. Come get me." Which, how creepy is that? And do you notice how it was all scribbled and messy, like whoever wrote it was really angry? Now, my first thought when I was doing my research was that Antonio had some crazy psycho fan from back in his football days. I mean, it would make sense since the person said that they had been watching for a long time. Antonio began his career in the 90s, and since it was now 2016, I mean, technically, it had been a long time, right? My second thought, and tell me if you agree, it kind of reminded me a little bit about John Bonet. That killer left that detailed ransom note using the family's notebook, stationery, whatever it was, which obviously has been highly scrutinized ever since. Like, why would the killer really take the time to sit, stay, and write this note on the family's paper? Same goes for this case. A lot of people wondered, would whoever tried to kill Antonio and Dawn really take the time to leave a note, even a short one? And AJ said that he called 911 after hearing the gunshots, but didn't hear anything else after. So did the killer write the note in complete silence after the shooting? Or did they write it in advance and leave it before they shot Antonio and Dawn? It's possible, sure, but likely? I'm not so sure. And it gets weirder, guys. So sitting right next to the note, there was a .22 caliber pistol. Almost like the killer was trying to do a favor to the police, like leaving the murder weapon right there next to the note, almost like, hey, here you go, here's a clue, silver platter. Now, Antonio and Dawn's bedroom had a bullet hole in the ceiling, and it makes me wonder if some type of struggle maybe went down and maybe Antonio pushed the gun away at one point and it went off or something like that. I don't know. But 3 shell casings were also found in the bedroom as well. The whole crime scene and the state of the house seemed pretty bizarre. First the note, then the gun, but then to top it all off, and what really set off some red flags for the detectives was the fact that not only were there no signs of forced entry, but also that AJ had disarmed the system before letting the police in. See, there was no record that it had been turned off at any other time during the night, but at 1:09 a.m., the system's motion detector caught movement upstairs. So you've got to wonder, how would someone get inside the house without setting off the alarm and also without disarming it? I mean, there was just so much to figure out in this case. So while the police were investigating, AJ called his older brother Josh since he lived so close. And Josh was in utter shock at the news. Right away, he got up, grabbed his shotgun, and he ran over, which, yeah, I thought it was a little too weird, too, that he grabbed a shotgun, considering everything that he had going on, and he was headed to a crime scene, but he did. And when he arrived at the scene, the police would not let him in or tell him anything about what was going on. He was completely in the dark, and beyond that, he was just absolutely devastated. And I should mention that according to Kyra, he was also noticeably high, and she could smell the weed on him. It was like potent. Now, because things seemed so suspicious about the crime scene, the police took in the only 2 witnesses that they had, AJ and Kyra. They separated them, they bagged up their hands to test for any gunshot residue, and they got to work on their investigation. Now, at this point, their main focus was AJ. I mean, the truth was that not only was Kyra fast asleep when all of this went down, but she was also a 12-year-old little girl. It's not impossible for someone that young to commit a murder, obviously, we've seen that, but it just didn't seem very likely. Now, while everyone was getting ready to go to the station and the police were checking the scene and everything else, checking around it, they also called Antonio's mom, Kay. They wanted to let her know what had happened. When she got there and saw AJ and Kyra in the back seats of these squad cars, she was in total shock. I mean, imagine finding out that your daughter-in-law was dead, that your son was fighting for his life, and your grandkids are considered suspects. Feels almost like the Menendez brothers, right? Like if somebody showed up there, it had to be a total nightmare for Kay. But while she was dealing with all of the shock and all of the feelings, she said something weird that really stood out to the police. And it was, quote, "Let me tell you something. If AJ did something like this, it had to be drugs," end quote. I mean, if AJ did something like this, who would say something like that? You think that he could do something like this? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is that for most of AJ's life, he was a really good kid. He did well in school. He was a star athlete, just like his dad. But for whatever reason, starting in the spring of 2016, which was during his last year of school, things changed for AJ. I'm assuming that he started hanging out with the wrong crowd, because instead of getting great grades and being responsible, he was now drinking, he was smoking, and he was lying 24/7. It got to the point where he flunked out of the elite private school that his mom and dad had worked around the clock just to get him into and pay for. So he had to go to public school his junior year because that's the only school that would take him. Antonio and Dawn didn't know what to do with AJ. They had finally begun to get Josh back on his feet at that point, and now all of a sudden their other son was now on this downward spiral. He was playing with fire. And literally, he was playing with fire. 2 days before the shooting, he had put gasoline in a bottle of rubbing alcohol and then set a fire at the top of the stairs inside the house. AJ put it out before it spread, and luckily nobody was hurt, but here's the thing. At first, he said he wasn't even the one who set the fire, even though there was literally no one else around who could have done it. And after some time, he finally did fess up to what he had done, but the point was that he lied. And lying was a big issue for Antonio. He really hated that his son had broken his trust. And worst of all, it wasn't a one-off kind of thing. He would lie about things even though it was blatantly obvious that he wasn't telling the truth. For example, he would sneak out of the house, but the security system would log when the doors were open, where he was moving inside the house. I mean, it was all very, very easy for Don and Antonio to know when and where he was sneaking out. But when they asked AJ what was up and what was going on, he would just lie and say that he didn't sneak out, even though they literally had the proof right at their fingertips. And at one point, Don even texted AJ saying, "I know you left. The alarm doesn't lie. I will show you where you went wrong." To which I'm assuming she had screenshot the log showing what time the security system was disarmed. But even with that, AJ didn't back down. He said, "I didn't go wrong. I have no reason to lie." Which I have to just say, I grew up in the era where we had a security system and my mom could hear a pin drop. There was no chance in hell I was ever sneaking out unless I was spending the night at a friend's house and we snuck out of their house. But nowadays, I didn't grow up in the era of ring cams, of cameras in the house, nanny cams, all of these things. Like, it's impossible, I feel like, to sneak out now. I mean, my kids will never get away with it. Never, never. But that's also because I'm a helicopter parent. But like, it's pretty crazy to me that he was just not backing down and he kept meeting them with resistance, saying, "No, I didn't. I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth. I didn't sneak out. Bro, hello. It's right here on the alarm log. Like, what do you mean?" But he was holding strong. Now, in his defense, the security alarm system didn't work great. There were times when it would randomly go off for no reason, and there were other times when someone would set it off and it would be on, but a door was left open or something like that, and the system didn't fully recognize it. I don't know. But the family referred to the alarm system as being, quote, finicky. So maybe in that instance, he wasn't lying, but again, it's hard to say due to how often he did lie. And it wasn't just the sneaking around. AJ drove his car, a bright red Mustang, very recklessly. One day in April of 2016, Antonio texted AJ in a group chat saying, "I'm sick of getting reports about silly crap that you're doing. This is the last warning." Then Don chimed in saying, "I totally agree. The way he's acting, he doesn't deserve that car. Something slow, something less impressive, something that would fit his maturity." So Don and Antonio were pretty much fed up with AJ. And AJ was getting sick of them too. He had texted his girlfriend, Kate Ober, to say how annoyed he was with his mom because she was yelling at him so much. And I'm sure he probably expected Kate to take his side. I mean, they had been together since 2014. So, for about 2 years, which is a pretty long time when you're talking about a high school relationship. Except the truth was that behind the scenes, Kate sort of agreed with Don and Antonio. She was frustrated with AJ. She was frustrated with the bad decisions that he was making. She also didn't like that he smoked weed all the time. And she really didn't like it when she found out that he was selling weed. She also didn't like that he kept stuff from her. And at one point she texted him saying, "I feel like you lie to me all the time." And here's the thing, AJ really was lying to Kate all the time, trying to really manipulate her. Like once he told her that a girl was texting him. So Kate said, "Okay, give me the girl's number." But the girl didn't even exist. AJ was just trying to make Kate jealous or something and get her, like baiting her into some sort of jealousy possessive thing. And when she asked for the girl's number, AJ asked one of his buddies to pretend to be a girl named Samantha. Then that friend, as Samantha, got into this entire argument and fight over text messages with Kate. Another time, AJ sent a whole bunch of texts back and forth with himself, which I know it's confusing, but basically he took screenshots of the texts and then showed them to Kate. He said that he was texting with some guy who Kate had a problem with for some reason or another. It was just very odd stuff like that. Things that, I don't know about you, but in my opinion, things that take a lot of effort to achieve what, right? To make Kate jealous or make her angry? What? I don't get it. But even with all of the back and forth with Kate, the person that he was apparently hurting the worst was his mom, Dawn. She felt like a failure of a mom. Here she was helping Antonio run multiple gyms, trying to be there for her kids in, any way that she possibly could, giving them all of these opportunities, anything they could ever want or need. But now this? It's disappointing. She texted AJ at one point not long before the shooting saying, "I'm so disappointed in you." Dawn would also vent to Josh, who, like I said before, was actually getting his life back on track by this point. And in part, it was thanks to her, because she never gave up on him. She helped him get back on his feet. She found him an apartment, got him furniture. He was attending a local art institute while working at the family gym, so they were still very close. A month before the shooting, she also texted Josh saying, "I don't know what I did wrong as a mom. I just wanted the best for my babies. I'm trying not to feel like a failure." And Josh wrote back saying, "I love you, Mom. Be strong. We will succeed." But clearly they hadn't succeeded. There was this horrendous shooting now at this point, and then AJ was brought into the police station, and his hands were being analyzed for gunshot residue. And while all of that was processing, AJ was interrogated by 2 detectives.
How was your relationship with your parents in general?
It was a pretty good relationship.
Okay, you get along with your mom? Get along with Dad? No problems, no
me
issues?
Me and Dad were, like, really close. And then me and my mom, like, me, my brother, and my sister, like, had our, like, little issues with my mom, but it was never anything, like, serious. Like, it was just, like, family stuff. But we were all, like, really close, so it's like a...
And what about Dad?
Dad was, like, the go-to for everything. So.
Any recent problems, any issues between you and him or anything like that?
No. Like, my dad's a pretty, like, chill guy. Okay. Likes to just talk things out, so any problem that we did have, we just talked about it.
Okay. And it's just, in the house, it's you, your mom,
my dad, and my little sister.
Your little sister. How did today kind of start? I mean, starting out in the morning. Yeah, from the morning. What time did you get up?
So, it was Friday. I didn't wake up, I don't know, until like 10, 11 o'clock, and I stayed in my room all day and just watched Netflix. My parents were, like, gone. Like, they were in and out of the house. My dad works from home a lot now, ever since he hurt his knee, so he's just been working at home a lot. And my mom's just in and out. She was mainly at our Bel Air gym, like, the whole day. And then she came back, and it was, like, she came back around 5, and it was me, my dad, and her. And then my mom and dad got dressed, and they went to one of my dad's friends' events that he had, so they were gone until, like, 8. And then when they got back, I went to go pick up my little sister from my grandmother's house. And we got back to the house at like 9 or 10. And then my little sister, I think she went straight to bed. My parents were laying in their bed. I don't know what they were doing. And I was just upstairs just watching Netflix still. And then it was like probably 1 or 2 and I was still up. And I turned off my TV. I was getting ready to go to bed and I went to the restroom. And when I came out, I heard the door open. And I haven't been feeling well like this whole day. So I've just been at home. And I thought it was my parents, so I like walked downstairs. So I was gonna ask if I can get some medicine, and like as I was walking downstairs, that's when I heard the 2 gunshots go off, and I ran back upstairs. And then when I ran back upstairs, I heard somebody run out of my parents' room and like hit the door. And then I don't know how they got out. I don't know because if they would have went out one of the doors, our alarm would have went off. So like my only guess is they had to have gone through a window because those don't go off with our alarm system. Like it's not like connected. And after I ran back upstairs, I went into my closet, and that's when I called 911, and, like, I had the phone call. And when the cops showed up, the lady told me to go downstairs, and I was like, I have a little sister here, I need to get her. And I went to my sister's room, I woke her up, and then me and her both walked downstairs, like, let the cops know that it's not like it's just us, like, we're not armed or anything like that. And they walked us outside, and that's when I called my brother, because he lives, like, right up the street. And him and my cousin, they both showed up. And
who's your cousin?
Trenton.
Trenton?
Trenton.
Okay, Trenton. Okay, and he's a cousin?
Yes.
And on whose side? Mom's or dad's?
Dad's.
Okay. What's his last name? Do you guys
Teamer. I don't know his full name. I know his last name is Teamer, though.
Teamer?
Teamer.
Oh, okay. Like team, but you are. Okay. And he showed up with your brother?
Yeah, because him and my brother are, like, super close, so they stay, so they, like, sometimes they'll stay at his house after he's done with work or something like that. And they both showed up. And then after they showed up, my brother, like, ran over because he was confused. Like, he didn't understand my phone call. Like, he thought it was a joke or something. So when he showed up, he didn't understand what was happening. The cops were trying to just, like, understand, like, what just happened. They were trying to talk to me separately and also talk to my sister. And I told him, I was like, my sister was asleep. She has, like, no idea what happened. I just went down there and woke her up. And then I explained to the cop, like, what I saw. And, like, I just, like, personally felt bad because, like, I saw the guy. Like, I feel like I should have done something. But, I mean...
Well, did you physically see somebody? Or?
No, like, I saw him running. Okay,
but then you would have seen him go out a window or out a door or something?
No, because when, like, you've been into the house, so it's like my parents' room's here, and then you'd have, like, it's when you come out of my parents' room, you go this way, and, like, this window, it's impossible. Like, that window's impossible to get out of.
Second floor, too.
Yeah, it's second floor. So either he would have had to have gone, like, this way and then gone over there by my sister's room, or he'd have to gone downstairs and out through one of the first floor windows.
Okay. Okay, and then you said from you were upstairs and you heard a door.
Right.
Which was which door?
My parents' first door.
The first door in their room.
Because normally my parents...
Which goes into the study.
Yes.
Okay.
My parents, like, keep their doors locked at night, and they, like, we're not, like, in there or allowed in there at night. So, like, when I heard the door open, like, normally it's, like, my dad or my mom getting up to, like, go get a snack or something, go get water. And, like, that's what I thought it was. So when I went down there, I was, like, really confused when I heard the gunshots.
So when you hear the door, how long was it from the time you heard the door to the time you started going down the stairs?
When I heard the door, that's when I started walking downstairs.
Okay, so you already go.
Yeah, I was already leaving my bath. Have you been in my room?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was already leaving my bathroom, and that's when I heard the door, so I just kept making my way.
Your bed's there, so you go around your bed.
Yeah, I went around my bed, and then I was making my way down the stairs, and that's when I heard the gunshots, when I got, like, 4 or 5 stairs down, and I, like, looked.
Do you know how many you heard? How many you heard?
I mean, I think I heard 2, but it may have been 3. I'm not really, like 100% positive, but, like, I know it's 2 or 3, and then that's when I came down, and I, like, kind of looked, because you know how, like, it has it goes down, like, you can peep real quick and see, like, what's, like, going on from my stairs. And, like, I saw someone, like, coming out, so I just took off back upstairs and went straight to my closet, and that's when I called.
Okay, so when you see them, you only seen them coming out of the room?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how long, did you stay there the whole time?
In the closet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in my closet the whole time with the door shut.
Okay, and then they run out. Did you hear any chimes or anything else?
Anything. Okay.
Now, the person that you seen, I mean, what did he look like?
I mean,
is it he or she or?
It was definitely a guy. It wasn't a girl. There wasn't like long hair or anything like that. I mean, they had it was like a mask, and like you could only see the eyes and the mouth. But he looked like a black guy. Mm-hmm. But I'm not like 100% positive. But I'm pretty sure it was an African American, and like I'd say like 6 feet maybe, somewhere around there. I couldn't give you like an age range. I didn't really like get to see his face or anything like that.
And then from there, you stayed in there until you actually came out?
Yeah, until the lady on the phone was like, yeah, you can come outside, the cops are there. Okay. So that's when I went and got my sister, and then we both walked downstairs.
Okay. Now, that being said, there's certain things that, that we also know and have.
Right.
Does your dad own a gun?
Yes, he does.
How many guns does he own?
He owns 1.
1 gun? Do you know what kind of gun it is?
I just know it's like a pistol. I think it's a 22, but I'm not like 100% positive. Like only time I've ever like used it was when we went to the gun range when I was like 8 years old or something like that. But like that's about it. And I know he has his case in one of his drawers, and like my dad, his drawers, the closet, and under the bed is like off limits. So like I've never gone in there or like seen it or anything like that, except for when he brings it out. So, like, I don't know where he was keeping the gun at the time, but I know he keeps it in one of those 3 places.
Okay. So, possibly a case in the drawer or somewhere in the closet.
Right.
Okay, and that's where he keeps it. 22. You think it's a 22?
I think it's a 22.
What color is it?
Black.
Black. Is it a revolver, automatic? You know the difference between the two? A revolver, they have the cylinder that turns.
Oh, it's not a revolver. Then it's definitely...
Like a clip that goes in it?
Yeah, a clip that goes in it, and then, like... You, like, flick the safety, and then you fire.
Okay. And you said it's black. Do you know what brand it is or anything like that?
I have no clue.
No clue, okay. Ultimately, you know there's something bad happened.
Right.
But ultimately, we got to kind of get to it because, I hear everything you're saying.
Right.
And ultimately, there are some issues. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you there was some issues, and we kind of got to go over and kind of get to the bottom of what's going on.
Exactly.
Ultimately, you're out there, they swabbed your hand.
Right.
So ultimately, if you fired a gun, even if you wash your hands, it's going to show. It's going to show.
Right.
So if there was something more, something different that happened, this is kind of the time to talk about it. Regardless of what your relationship with your dad, if it's good or if it's not so good, and you just don't feel comfortable talking about it. That's a whole separate issue.
Right.
Ultimately, we need to figure out what's going to happen, what happened today.
Exactly.
And there's 2 ways. I mean, it's going to be either, you telling us exactly what happened, and if this is what it is, then that's what it is. But ultimately, if it's something different, it's you telling us what happened, and then ultimately everything would match up. You know, if you didn't fire a gun, there wouldn't be any gunshot residue on your hands. And all this stuff would start matching up. But when you start having inconsistencies, it starts making it tough. And then ultimately, you know, this is kind of the time to discuss it and get it out. It's, you know, if you're familiar, a man is only good as his word.
Right.
So ultimately, if you're here and you're telling us this is what happened, this is my word, I'm not lying, I'm telling the truth, and then then things start coming up down the road, like a kid coming back saying that this had happened or that happened. Then when we sit down, it's a different conversation.
Exactly.
And at that time, you really can't go back and say, well, this is what happened, because now we're at a loss of trust.
Right.
You know, and again, we got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of things that we know, and we want to hear your side of it before we start kind of getting into that, you know, so you understand. So again, if there's something different, this is the time. You know, hey, we're at you know, the police department, bad things have happened, and you know, ultimately, this is kind of the time to talk about it.
Exactly.
You know, not later, not another time, because I mean, if anything, it's for them. This is. They don't have a word in this at this point in time, okay? Last we heard, your dad is still in the hospital. Your mom didn't make it, okay? So it's a bad thing. So you understand the seriousness of this, okay? So that's why we need to know what happened. You know, gunshot residue. Like I said, even if you wash your hand in that close proximity, okay? So that being said, is there anything different?
Nothing different.
Okay.
That's the story.
Okay. Now, ultimately, you know, when we're in the study that leads to your dad's room,
right?
In there, when you look up, there's a bullet hole in the ceiling that comes from the loft, which is your bedroom.
Bullet hole in the ceiling.
It comes through the floor from the loft, from your room upstairs.
Yeah.
Where your room is.
The third floor.
Yeah.
There's a bullet hole in the ceiling.
There's a bullet hole in the study area that goes through, and you can see that it comes through because it pushes out in the study area.
Never seen that.
They use a trajectory rod too.
Yeah, and they use the trajectory. They have the rod. They use a rod. They put it in there to see what the angle is.
Right.
And then on the floor, there's an actual bullet that was actually fired.
How long has that been there?
Well, that's why we're talking to you, because there's fresh sheetrock on the floor.
Right.
So, and that's kind of what we're getting at. There's things out there that we're trying to figure out how this has happened. You know, if there's 2 gunshots or 4 gunshots,
right? How
do we have one that's coming from the room upstairs, and then we've got other ones in there?
I can explain the gun from the room upstairs. It was like 2, 3. It was like, I think it was 2, maybe 3 weeks ago. Like me and one of my friends was just like playing around, and they were about to leave, and he was like, hey. Well, not really. He was like me. I was like, hey, like, have you ever shot a gun before? And they were like, nah, I've never done it. And I was like, do you want me to show you how to? And like, I like went and checked the 3 places, and the gun was under my dad's bed. And I like laid the pillow. I laid my pillow, and then like a blanket over it and a blanket under it, thinking like that would stop it. But I guess it did not stop it.
Yeah. Now, see, and that kind of goes back to what we were saying just a minute ago. You know, because a few minutes ago you said that you haven't seen it, you haven't shot it since you were a kid, and then now we kind of give you a little more, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute. So, you know,
I understand.
We don't want to keep getting deeper into this, because there's more. I mean, that's the thing is, and ultimately, you know, if the gun was fired tonight, you know, again, the GSR test is going to show it.
Exactly.
So to say that you didn't, or it was fired.
I didn't fire it tonight.
No.
Last time I fired it was like 2-3 weeks ago, when I put a. I guess my parents just never saw that. Because I mean, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's what I'm saying. Is even if you wash your hands, whatever you have, it's still going to show.
Right.
Okay. So that's why I'm saying is, you know,
something from like 3 weeks ago. You think?
No.
Oh,
you fired the gun tonight.
No,
you know, whether it's up in the room or whether it's in, you know, it's going to show that's there.
Exactly.
Ultimately, so or let's just say there was somebody else in the house with you. If that's the case, we need to know, somebody we need to talk to. But again, we've already went to the, hey, I haven't seen it, I haven't fired it since I was little, and I don't know where he keeps it. We don't go there, it's off limits, so I don't go in there, to, okay, I went in there, to, yeah, we were up there and we fired a gun, and we put the towel, we put the blanket and all that stuff. So you kind of see how where we're going.
And that's like the only like.
No, I know,
yeah,
but
I understand where
I
you're
just
coming
don't
from,
want it to
yeah.
be more like, wow, and now there's gunshot residue on his hands or on his clothing.
There won't be any
or on the
gunshot
clothing
residue on my hand or anything like that.
or something like that.
Right.
So some of the things that are standing out already with this interrogation is, for one, how cool, calm, and collected AJ seemed. I mean, remember, his mom had just been murdered, and his dad was fighting for his life. And according to AJ, he was really close to his parents. The whole family was really tight-knit. So why wasn't he more upset? I don't know, maybe he was in total shock still? But what really stands out to me is how his story changed. At first, he said he didn't even know where his dad kept the gun, and that it had been at least 8 years since he had ever personally touched it. But when the detective revealed that they found a hole in the ceiling, AJ said, "Oh yeah, right. A few weeks ago I was showing my buddy the gun and it went off and somehow my parents didn't see the hole."
Let me ask you this. You made an interesting statement a minute ago about when you and your buddy were playing with your dad's gun 3 weeks ago, or whenever it was, 2-3 weeks ago, you said.
He was gone by the time I was playing with it, but like we talked about it. That's like the conversation we had, but I was the one that like.
So you said that you fired it into a pillow. Where's that pillow? What kind of pillow was it?
It's in my closet.
It's in your closet?
Yeah.
Like, you got like a bunch of doors in your room?
No, the closet.
The actual closet.
Yeah, the actual closet. You're gonna see there's an A&M. There's an A&M cover that has like a hole in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why'd you shoot it into a pillow?
Like I saw that on movies. I thought that like stops the bullet. So like that's what I did.
Okay. You weren't worried about your parents hearing the gun go off?
They weren't home.
Oh. Okay. Well, let me tell you something interesting tonight. This is something else that you said that you kind of told on yourself a little bit. Because you said when you were playing with the gun 2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, which originally was with your friend and now it's not with your friend.
No, he was there. Like we had the conversation.
But not when you fired the gun.
Yeah, he wasn't there. He wasn't there when I fired the gun.
So, which basically, okay, we won't even get into that yet. But so basically, what you just told me was that you shot into a pillow because you've seen it on movies, and it stops the bullet or whatever, or it quiets the bullet. Is what they use it for in movies. Kind of weird, man. Both your parents tonight had pillows over their head before they were shot. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
You see how
like
stuff
that,
keeps adding up here?
Okay, like that like. No, my dad sleep. You can ask anyone who has ever been in a room with my dad. My dad, his entire 42 years of living, he sleeps with a pillow right over his eyes with just his nose and mouth out. And my mom, she sleeps with a pillow right here. She sleeps with a pillow right here, and it folds over her head, and she can see clearly out. I know how my parents sleep. I know exactly how.
The pillow wasn't folded over your mom's head.
Oh, wasn't it?
No.
No.
So after that rocky interrogation, police felt like they had all they needed to arrest AJ for the murder of not only his mother, but his father as well. Because sadly, just hours after his father had arrived at the hospital, Antonio also died. A medical examiner was later able to determine that whoever shot Antonio and Dawn must have walked into their room and stopped either 2 to 3 feet away from them while they were just lying there asleep in their bed, and then opened fire and started shooting them. Since the police figured by now that AJ was the one who had done it, they let Kyra, the sister, go because she wasn't a suspect anymore. But here's the curveball for you. The results came back for that gunpowder residue test they did on AJ's hands and clothes, and there was nothing. There was no gunpowder on him, and he was still denying that he played any part in these murders. And on top of that, more tests said that there was no blood on his shirt, his pants, or his sandals. AJ's phone was also analyzed to see what he had been doing right before he called 911. It said that for a while he was scrolling on social media, but he stopped at 1:04 a.m. At that time, he plugged his phone into a charger. At 1:08 a.m., he unplugged the phone again, and then a minute later, the home's security system upstairs motion detector went off. Then, 8 minutes after that, his display screen came on for a quick second, a nanosecond, and then turned off. That happened again multiple times between 1:19 and 1:24 a.m. Now, I don't know what he was doing to where it would turn the screen on and off for a second at a time. Maybe he was using the screen as a flashlight. Maybe he was worried about someone seeing him, so he didn't want to have the actual flashlight mode on the whole time, so he just kind of did little short bursts of it. I don't know if maybe it was in his pocket, and when it hits the home button, the screen goes on for a second, you know what I mean? I don't really know. And you might think that maybe he was trying to be sneaky because he heard an intruder and that he was trying to get light on there to look around, see if he could see the real gunman. Maybe he didn't want them to see him. But he didn't call 911 until like 20 minutes later. Then at 1:25, the living room motion detector was activated. 15 minutes later, AJ's display screen came on again. And that is when he called 911. So, I mean, all of this evidence, it just wasn't really adding up in any way. I mean, some of it made it look like AJ was guilty, but some of it made it look like maybe he was innocent. It was just very, very confusing. So the police held AJ in a juvenile detention center while they tried to get more evidence together against him. But then 2 weeks after the murders, give or take, 2 men broke into Antonio's gym and stole some of the computers. Was it a coincidence? The police thought so. They basically brushed it off and didn't look into the incident any further. But also, I mean, talk about strange. I mean, a gym typically isn't the type of place somebody goes to rob, unless it's for gym equipment, right? They don't really have a lot of cash on hand. Most money comes from subscriptions, things like that, where you'll be charged your gym membership through a credit card. But the point is, the police didn't think that the break-in had anything to do with Antonio and Dawn's murders. They were still, though, so hyper-focused on AJ. And even though he was just 16, he was ultimately tried as an adult for 2 counts of capital murder. He couldn't be sentenced to death as a minor, but he was looking at life in prison. His bond was set at $200,000, and surprisingly, that following month in April 2017, he was able to pay it. AJ.
How is it like to be you're out of jail? Can you talk to us about how you're feeling?
So there were 2 conditions to his release. First, he was on house arrest with his grandma until his trial in March of 2019. The second condition was that he had to take random drug tests.
This is my ankle monitor. It was part of my bond conditions. Once I was bonded out, they placed me on house arrest, and it's just been on since then.
We visited AJ in 2019, and he told us what life on house arrest was like.
And it's frustrating. I look down, it just reminds you of everything that I have to deal with in the case and all of that stuff.
He can go out into the backyard, he can go out into the street, but he cannot go past like the mailbox and stuff like that.
I'm missing out on so much, and I'm seeing all my friends go on and do things with their life. I'm just stuck here. I try to stray away from social media as much as possible, just because it just shows me everything that everyone else is doing. It's hard.
So that was his life, sitting at home, getting ready for his trial, trying to find a way to make himself look innocent. And he got a lucky break after a few months, because someone came forward with new evidence. A close friend of the family, named Maxine Adams, testified at a pretrial hearing that Antonio and her husband Cecil were involved in a sex work ring.
A prostitution ring that my husband, my sister-in-law, Antonio, and another individual were all involved in during this time. And so I didn't know, like the call records are all like crazy. The one woman that was with Antonio has contact. I don't know if it's the pimp or whatnot, but I just felt like I don't know if y'all knew that or were aware of the prostitution thing.
So do you think this is related to the homicide, or do you think it's just 2 independent things?
I think it's related because the way, like, the money involved and there was a thing about keeping quiet. And so it was right before, like, they had the death threats and they had changed their life insurance. Like, they were doing all of these things. And my husband and Antonio talked 4 days before the murder. And so I, literally, Monday, and then he died. Now, I don't think my husband had any, I don't know what was talked about. I don't know. He said, oh yeah, we just hugged, and just said a prayer together or whatnot. It could be completely 2 independent things, but because it was it's the one connection. It is the one connection between all of them.
But he could just be, he could be a sugar daddy. He could be a guy with money that
Could be with a whole bunch of attractive women that like to get paid. Could be.
I've heard it worse.
Apparently, Antonio's gym business was just a cover for this like mega sex operation. And it's not like Maxine just came up with this out of nowhere, like she pulled it out of her hat and just was like, oh, here's what we're going to go with. She actually had gone to the police with this information back in December of 2016, but they never publicly released that statement. And that may be because the police apparently looked into it all, but they didn't find it to be all of that credible, so they closed the investigation. But now, at the pretrial hearing, Maxine said that she had hired private investigators to look into that sex ring again. Only she didn't remember the private investigator's name. And she also had no evidence that this alleged sex ring had ever existed. And I've got to say, this whole thing is just weird. It doesn't sound like there's any evidence that Maxine was telling the truth. But also, she had no motive to lie, especially because she was implicating her own husband in all of this. I mean, she was basically making her life more difficult with this testimony. So, did she believe it was real? Was it real? I don't know. The point is, nobody really believed Maxine. So AJ now had to come up with some other strategy for his trial, which he did, because every step of this story now had a new twist or turn. In January of 2019, as the trial was literally just about to get started, Cecil, Maxine's husband, died. He's the one who was supposedly doing the sex work ring with Antonio. Cecil had been driving on the highway when all of a sudden his car stalled. Before he was able to get it back up and running, another car smashed into him from behind and he died. Which, I mean, sure, it could have been a freak accident, but you've also got two guys who are involved in an alleged sex ring. One of them gets murdered. The other one has this bizarre car issue right before his alleged killer goes to trial. It's pretty suspicious. And I don't like to spend a lot of time on conspiracy theories or anything like that, but I'm mentioning this because a ton of people close to the case were kind of like, that's weird. That doesn't sound like a total coincidence. I mean, AJ's defense team jumped on Cecil's death and all of these sex ring allegations immediately. They tried to get the charges against AJ just thrown out entirely.
It's going to be almost impossible for us to figure out what happened in this case. She told the Houston Police Department in December of 2016 that there was death threats made against Antonio Armstrong Sr. She said that she had knowledge of him changing his life insurance policy based on these death threats. One of the motions is to get the case dismissed. We've been severely prejudiced.
But the judge wasn't having it. The charges stood, and AJ's trial began in March of 2019. The prosecution talked about his tense relationship with his parents and how he disarmed the security system to let the police in. The defense team said that there was no way that AJ did it because his DNA wasn't at the crime scene. They also decided to throw another name into the mix, Josh. They said that he had a very disturbing past and also access to the family's home. See, back while AJ was in custody and the investigation was still going on, Josh had voluntarily checked himself into a hospital in Houston for a psychiatric evaluation. He told the staff that he was struggling with his parents' deaths, and he also didn't believe that AJ was the killer. He didn't think that AJ had it in him. It was really weighing on him that his brother was behind bars for something that horrific. He also told the staff that all of his symptoms had just recently begun. They included paranoia, extreme depression, anxiety. Josh was also using substances to cope, and he felt suicidal a lot of the time. And while he was there in the emergency room, he ended up being given an antipsychotic drug. But even with that medication, Josh kept getting worse, much worse. He began hearing voices in his head. He had thoughts of killing other people, and at one point, he thought that he was God. He was also obsessing over the murders, making these long lists of every possible suspect that he could think of, because he still didn't believe that his brother AJ did this. He basically put anyone and everyone on that list, including his girlfriend from the time of the murders, which would have been impossible because she was asleep at his apartment at the time. He literally had to wake her up to tell her that he was leaving to go to his parents' house. So that alone just really goes to show how paranoid Josh was becoming. But during AJ's trial, AJ's lawyers tried arguing that no, Josh wasn't actually paranoid. He was feeling guilty. and he was having some kind of psychotic break that had driven him to kill. But the defense had one major issue with that argument. They weren't allowed to enter Josh's medical records into evidence. So let's just say neither side, the prosecutors or the defense, had a grand slam in terms of making the argument that they were making. I mean, they could make it, but they didn't really have any weight behind it. And after 2 days of deliberation, the jury could not come to an agreement. The trial ended in a hung jury, which meant that AJ was free to go back to house arrest until the second trial. Now, during that time, AJ and his girlfriend Kate had a baby boy they named Hendrix, but nicknamed Hendo for short. Which, you heard that right. Through this whole murder investigation and the trial, Kate had stood by AJ. And they even worked together to get an exception to the house arrest so that AJ was allowed to be at the hospital for the birth. And for a while there, it almost seemed like things were normal, like AJ was living a normal, quiet life with his family. That was until October of 2022, when his second trial began. This time, the prosecution tried a new argument, focusing more on the phone records and how AJ's screen had been turning on and off. The defense team stuck with what had worked the last time, spending a lot of time talking about how still there was no DNA to connect AJ to the crime. So get this, the jury ended with another deadlock. They couldn't come to a decision, and once again, AJ was sent home on house arrest. And the last time that AJ was on house arrest, he had a baby. This time, he got married. This was in early 2023. He and Kate did the ceremony in his backyard since he wasn't allowed to go anywhere else, you know. His whole family was also there to support him, including his sister Kyra. Now, I've seen some people theorize that the only reason AJ had a baby and got married was to soften his image, that he was no longer some wild teenager on trial for the murder of his parents. Now he was this loving husband and father. And I've got to say, though, taking care of a baby is not easy, so it'd be pretty crazy for him to have a kid that he didn't even want to have just to look a teeny bit more respectable to jurors. But what can I say? I've also heard weirder things before and seen weirder things before. But if you were to look at pictures of him from around this time, if you didn't know his story, you'd think he was just like any other guy in his 20s going through big life milestones. Getting married, starting a family, taking cute pictures, posting all of them to social media. And all I'll say is that the prosecution did not want to let AJ wiggle out of a conviction by playing to people's sympathy or just doing good PR. So before the next trial, they wanted to make sure that all of the evidence that they had was as strong as possible. They brought in a blood pattern analyst to go through everything that had been sitting in storage ever since the murders, which at this point, that was all the way back in 2016. And at this point, it was 2023, so 7 years later. Now, back in July of 2016, when AJ was taken in for questioning, someone at the police department had put a visitor's badge on his shirt, that same shirt that he had been wearing when the police arrived after his 911 call. The sticker was apparently never removed for the blood analysis in 2016. So now the analyst removed that sticker and found tiny reddish-brown circular stains on the back of the sticker, stains that appeared to be blood. So after they did more tests on those spots, it turned out to be Antonio's blood. So when AJ's trial started in the summer of 2023, the prosecutors argued that after Antonio was shot, he was gasping for air while his lungs were filling with blood. Then, and this is disgusting and very graphic, guys, but as he was wheezing, he exhaled some of that blood, and it landed on AJ's shirt. But the question then was, well, why were there no other bloodstains on the shirt? Just the few small ones behind the sticker. I mean, these stains were smaller than the tip of lead in a mechanical pencil, like tiny, tiny. They were apparently small enough, according to the experts, that most of these droplets dried up during the time when they were in the air after they came out of Antonio's mouth and before they even landed on his shirt. That's how small they were. Apparently, it was just a complete miracle that any liquid blood made it to the fabric at all. And then, when the person at the department put that sticker on the shirt, that sort of held the blood in place. It stopped it from drying up or getting brushed off. And if you're thinking, okay, Annie, that actually sounds really unrealistic, that's probably just a coincidence that a few droplets made it onto AJ's shirt. And then, by another coincidence, the sticker happened to preserve them for 7 years. Then you'll probably agree with the defense argument, which was that clearly these tests were all wrong, that there had been some sort of cross-contamination and there was no actual blood on AJ's shirt. His defense team was still arguing that Josh could be the real killer. They brought in a psychiatrist claiming that Josh had been psychotic, that he was having religious delusions, all of these things, which honestly does sound pretty spot on. I mean, this guy actually thought he was God at one point, right? The sister Kyra and the grandmother Kay even testified, saying that Josh was in a, quote, dark place before the murders. But after 2 weeks of trial and 2 days of deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Antonio Armstrong Jr., guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
AJ was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. His whole family was devastated. They all stood by AJ's side throughout 3 trials, and now, in their opinion, an innocent man was going away for the rest of his life. One juror from AJ's first trial came forward shortly after this verdict and said, "I'm concerned that the jurors didn't understand reasonable doubt. And it's unfortunate that he's been on trial this many times. Try enough times, and you'll find the right jury." AJ and his team requested a 4th trial, but that request was denied in October of 2023. So, after 3 trials, has justice been served? Is AJ where he belongs? Well, if you're not convinced that he was really guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, you're not alone. Some of AJ's family and friends created a fund for AJ called AJ Armstrong Defense Fund. The goal of the campaign is to free AJ. And so far, a little over $100,000 has been raised for his legal fees, which that kind of money really goes to show that he does have quite the support system around him. This includes his wife, Kate. She's raising Hendrix, Hendo, on her own, and when Hendrix asks where Daddy is, Kate just tells him that he's on a big work trip. I guess she really hopes that one day he will be released and he'll get to come home and be with his son. But really, my heart breaks for Hendrix. Really, for any kid who ever has to get caught up in anything having to do with murder or trials and who can't understand why their parent isn't around anymore. Even if you believe that AJ is guilty and he belongs in prison, it still sucks that his son doesn't have a dad at home to raise him. Today, AJ is still in prison. He's been staying out of trouble, and he even leads the prison's praise and worship team.
Why did you kill your parents?
I didn't kill my parents. I would say falsely convicted, because I don't believe the conviction that took place was the result that should have happened. It should have been either another hung jury or a not guilty verdict. There's no way ever I would have in a million years imagined being here, but here I am. And, it's just about taking it one day at a time. The appeal process can be a slow process, but at the end of the day, I know I'm gonna walk out of here. This isn't how my story ends. This isn't how things go for me. It's just continuing to keep my trust in God regardless of what comes my way. But yeah, absolutely not. It's a false conviction.
Then if it's not you, then who?
I can't give you that answer. If I knew that answer, I wouldn't be in here. If my family knew that answer, we would have given that over to the authorities as quick as possible. But it's just due to their lack of investigation and them not pursuing anything outside of me from that night, like they've said on the stand, it's put us in a situation to where we don't have anything. And we're probably gonna have to live the rest of our lives not knowing what happened to my parents. And that's unfortunate, but it's the situation the Houston Police Department and the DA's office has put us in.
Now, like I said, most of his family still believes he's innocent. But from what I can tell on social media, there's apparently a rift between Josh and the rest of the family. Josh doesn't follow the sister Kyra or AJ's defense fund on Instagram. So does that mean he's changed his mind about thinking that AJ is innocent? Is he pissed that AJ's lawyers tried to make it sound like he was the real killer during the trial? And I'm just speculating, but I want to hear what you think. I mean, this case was one of those that seemed so obvious at first. But then you had the break-in at the gym, the blood showing up on the shirt years later, the alleged sex work ring, the multiple trials. All of it really does make you wonder, or at least it makes me wonder. Now, for the most part, when I read comments, people think that AJ is a sociopath who shows no empathy or remorse for what he did. And yes, in many ways, it all points to AJ. Not only did he disarm the alarm system after the police got there, but he showed zero emotion during his interrogation over the fact that his parents had died. However, there are also definitely plenty of people out there who think that he was wrongfully convicted. Clearly, I mean, his family has raised over $100,000. I also find it weird that the police didn't really focus on any other leads. It's like they just knew as soon as they had their suspect, as soon as AJ answered the door, that's who they were going to zero in on. The blood showing up on the shirt years later, right before what was going to likely be AJ's last trial, is that a conspiracy or a coincidence or no? Not to mention the whole Antonio being part of this sex work ring that never got confirmed or denied, but the computers at his work were stolen? That feels weird. I don't know. What do you guys think? Or do you think AJ is where he should be and it's Occam's razor and it's easy to understand? Do you think it should be a case that's re-examined? Do you think there's a different motive? Let me know what you guys think. I definitely am scratching my head a little bit on this one. Not so much that I don't think it's AJ, because I think that is pretty clear cut, but the computer's being stolen, and maybe that was just a coincidence. I don't know. There's just something that I can't quite unlock. So let's sound off in the comments. I want to know what you guys think about all of it. So tell me, do you think like what the motive was? Do you think that they got the right person? Do you think that there was any truth to the sex work ring? Why would the wife try to implicate her husband? It just makes no sense, right? In any event, I appreciate you hearing Dawn and Antonio's story today and keeping their voices loud and to be heard, because whether it was AJ or somebody else, the ultimate goal is that they get justice and that there's accountability. So I appreciate you hearing their story. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of 10 to Life with me, Annie Elise. If you want to hear more and you don't want to miss future episodes, make sure to take a quick second, hit that subscribe button. It's totally free to do so, but that way you won't miss any future episodes. Also, YouTube likes to do this thing a couple times a year where they mass unsubscribe people. It doesn't just happen to me, it happens to everyone. So even if you think you're subscribed, just double check and make sure that you are, because more times than not I hear from people, I was unsubscribed. Why did YouTube do this? So just double check. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and until the next one, stay safe.